3 seconds. That is how long it takes for your brain to decide whether to begin something or abandon it. Not 3 minutes, not 3 hours, 3 seconds. And in those 3 seconds, something inside your brain is already running a calculation you never agreed to run. The problem was never your willpower. The problem is the algorithm running inside your skull. You sit down to work, you open the document, and then, nothing. Not laziness. Something older than that. Something neurological. And by the end of this, you are going to understand exactly what that is. There is someone you know. Maybe it is you. They cannot focus on their work for 15 minutes. But they watched an entire series in one weekend. They cannot start a 30-minute study session. But they scrolled for 4 hours without moving. It is not that they cannot focus. It is that their brain will only focus on what it has been trained to want. This is not a moral failure. This is a conditioning failure. And there is a specific biological reason it happens. One that most people are never told. You have been lied to about dopamine. Every article told you it is the pleasure chemical, the reward signal, the feel-good molecule. That is wrong. Dopamine is not about pleasure. Dopamine is about wanting. Dopamine does not make you feel good. It makes you need to try again. Research from neuroscientist Kent Berridge at the University of Michigan separated the brain's wanting system from its liking system and showed they are controlled by completely different mechanisms. Dopamine runs the wanting, not the having, not the enjoying, the wanting. And what your brain has been trained to want determines what feels possible. Here is what actually happens inside your brain when you spend weeks, months, years feeding it high stimulation inputs. Your dopamine baseline drops. The amount of dopamine your brain releases when you begin a normal task, studying, writing, building something, is now below the threshold your brain requires to feel motivated at all. Normal life starts to feel gray. Not sad, not broken, just gray. Your brain did not break. It recalibrated. And it recalibrated around the inputs you kept giving it. Neuroscientists call this downregulation. Your dopamine receptors, flooded repeatedly by high stimulation, begin to reduce in number and in sensitivity. Less receptors, less signal, less motivation. And the tasks that require the most delayed reward, studying, creating, building, feel the most impossible of all. In 2011, a study published in Nature Neuroscience found that rats with restricted access to high-fat food showed the same dopamine receptor depletion patterns as rats given cocaine. The mechanism was identical. Not similar. Identical. The difference between addiction and what is happening to your motivation is not the substance. It is the label society assigned to the behavior. Researchers have mapped the same neural pathways activated by social media scrolling as those activated by slot machines. Same pathway, same mechanism, different reputation. Neither can I. I have sat in front of work I genuinely wanted to do and felt absolutely nothing reach me. Addiction is not only what destroys your life, it is what quietly makes the rest of your life feel less worth living. When your brain is operating from a depleted baseline, work is not just difficult. Work is neurologically unrewarding at a biological level. That is not laziness. That is neuroscience. The brain does not choose laziness. It chooses efficiency. Every brain, every single one, is constantly running a cost-benefit calculation. How much energy does this action require? How much reward will it return? Is the return worth the cost? For most of human history, that calculation was simple. Move toward food. Move away from predators. Rest when neither is required. But the inputs changed. Your brain inherited a survival machine and handed it an algorithm designed by a team of 2,000 engineers whose only job was to make you stay. You are not fighting your laziness. You are fighting a weapon that was built specifically to defeat your self-control. And it was built by people who study this for a living. In the 1950s, psychologist B.F. Skinner placed rats in a box with a lever. When the lever always produced a pellet, the rats pressed it, then stopped. Predictable reward. No urgency. When the lever produced a pellet sometimes, randomly, unpredictably, the rats pressed it compulsively. They could not stop. Skinner discovered that the most addictive reward schedule is not constant reward. It is unpredictable reward. Your feed does not show you the same post every time. It does not give you the same dopamine every scroll. Sometimes nothing. Sometimes everything. And your brain, running a system designed 300,000 years ago, cannot distinguish between the scroll and the lever. The mechanism is the same. The compulsion is the same. And nobody warned you about this. This is not a personal problem. This is a scale problem. In 2023, researchers at Stanford found that the average person touches their phone 2,600 times per day. Not heavy users. Average. That is 2,600 dopamine signals before breakfast, before a single decision about your own life has been made. Your brain is not distracted. Your brain is exhausted from processing more dopamine signals before noon than your grandparents processed in a week. The prefrontal cortex, the exact region responsible for sustained focus, planning, and goal-directed behavior, requires low-stimulation periods to maintain its capacity. It was not designed for this volume. Nobody's was. This is not weakness. This is biology, at the edge of a design specification it was never meant to reach. The people who built these systems knew. Former product manager at Google Tristan Harris testified to the U.S. Senate in 2019 that the platforms were designed using the same psychological principles as slot machines. Not accidentally. Deliberately. Chamath Palihapitiya, early investor and executive at Facebook, said in 2017 that the short-term dopamine-driven feedback loops being built were destroying how society works. He said he felt guilt. His children are not allowed on the platform he helped build. They built the trap. They understood what it was. And they kept building. This is not a technology problem. This is an ethics problem, dressed in the language of innovation. But knowing who built it does not rebuild you. That is what Part 2 is for. So here is what you actually are. You are not a person with bad habits. You are a person with a nervous system that received high-amplitude stimulation at a frequency and volume it was not designed to process, and adapted to it. Your brain did not fail you. Your brain did exactly what brains do. It adapted to the environment you gave it. The environment was the problem, not you. But here is the part most people stop before reaching. Knowing the cause does not restore the system. Understanding your addiction does not remove the addiction. It only removes the shame. And that is actually the first step. Because you cannot repair something you still believe is your fault. Remove the blame. Then you can see the wiring. Then you can change it. That is the map. Part 2 is the work. For most people, the misdiagnosis is the problem, not the condition. When you believe you are lazy, you try willpower solutions. You set alarms. You make lists. You punish yourself for slipping. And every time it fails, the diagnosis deepens. I am lazy. I am broken. I have no discipline. Viral line. You cannot use discipline to treat a dopamine system that has been recalibrated away from discipline. It is the same as trying to see more clearly by pressing harder on your eyes. The effort is real. The method is wrong. The research is consistent on this point. Willpower depletion studies, led by Roy Baumeister at Florida State University, found that self-control operates like a muscle that fatigues. But the muscle analogy ends there. Because unlike a muscle, the dopamine system does not rebuild from strain. It rebuilds from rest, from low stimulation, from deliberate reduction, not from trying harder. Part 2 covers the protocol, not the motivation speech, not the 5 tips, the actual biological sequence for recovering a depleted dopamine baseline. The number is 23. That is the minimum number of consecutive low-stimulation days researchers found necessary before the first measurable receptor recovery begins. 23 days before your brain starts to rebuild what years of overstimulation removed. That number should disturb you. Not because it is impossible, because it is longer than any willpower strategy has ever asked of you, and it requires something completely different from willpower. It requires a system. Subscribe if you want that, because the map, without the next section, is just a description of where you are stuck, and you already know where you are stuck. The number is 23. Part 2 covers the exact protocol for reaching it, and what happens inside your dopamine system on each of those days. If you missed episode 3, the cortisol awakening response is destroying your mornings before you have made a single choice. That episode runs 8 minutes and changes how you set your phone before you sleep. Every episode on this channel exists for the same reason. Subscribe if you want that, because I am not making content. I am building a map for people who are lost.